We raised about $100 million around that vision. And when COVID hit, we lost it all. We laid off 92% of the company over Zoom.
Did you cry?
I cried once. I cried because our board member...
Where are you from?
From Seattle. Moved to San Francisco 17 years ago. Didn't really know what startups were until I got there. Then this crazy thing called Airbnb launched about 18 months after I arrived, and the rest is history. And by that, I mean, I got brought in 12 years ago, roughly today, to start a company that was called Beyond Stays and became Beyond Pricing. So I got brought in as a CEO of now our team's biggest competitor. Built that business for about a year and ended up getting into into a dispute with the other co-founders that had been brought in as well, and ended up taking the data science team, leaving Beyond, and founding what became Wheelhouse and Lyric, our operating company at the same time. Lyric eventually, it was basically, when you think about Wheelhouse plus Lyric, the vision was, could you take data to not only improve pricing, but eventually select better assets? I don't know, maybe that resonates with you a little bit. So we also thought, especially when you looked at the urban hospitality, Lyric was leasing apartments to put on the short-term rental market. An apartment isn't really designed for a perfect hospitality experience. It's just not. It's big. You have a big fridge. It's under optimized. So Lyric's eventual vision was, could we use Wheelhouse to be a data source that eventually not only told us what to buy, but how to design it? How should it look? Impact everything from the design of a building to the merchandising of that asset. So that was the bigger goal we took on. We raised about $100 million around that vision. And when COVID hit, we lost it all. So that's the very accelerated version of being an operator who got, our team unfortunately we got dealt a pretty tough card with COVID coming. We definitely didn't expect that. And pivoted fully to software and have been there ever since. But have done multiple software plays, multiple operations plays within the category.
So tell me how, it seems like, so you said 17 locations across the US?
We had 24. Yeah, 20. We were in 14 markets, 24 or 26 buildings. I can't remember. It's been a little while now.
So that was a big operation. I could only imagine. How many doors was that, or units?
800 doors.
800. So you said, you were burning 5-6 mil a month. So you had...
When COVID hit.
Yeah. So that was a large rent, like liability. So I would imagine you were doing a lot of volume on the revenue side as well.
We were. I mean, we had not figured out everything for sure, right? We were basically... Lyric had gone from an idea to 26 buildings, 800 doors in about 4 years, 3.5 years. Now, that was with the CEO who had never built a hospitality company before and hadn't, we were doing that. We were building technology. So we were building a PMS. We had our RMS. In retrospect, it looks a little bit like hubris. The reality is Lyric was being built in a capital environment that's very different than today, where you had people who were making bets that you could basically use technology to scale operating companies faster than ever before. We were in the WeWork era, right? So it wasn't hubris to us. In fact, we were really excited about building, we thought there was a kind of a unique moment in the history of hospitality.
Kind of the Sonder Vacasa era.
Yeah, biggest competitor was Sonder, right? Vacasa was doing vacation rental homes management, and Sonder and us were both scaling on the lease model. And the lease model is great if you want to scale fast. It is not great if there's a sudden market downturn where you carry all the exposure. And we and other investors were willing to make a bet that you could grow fast enough that you could become a true corporate travel brand. So, for example, a true corporate travel brand in our mind had to have a New York City presence. Otherwise, who are you kidding? You're not corporate travel in America, right? So we definitely, we paid to move into great assets with the goal that eventually you'd be able to use the technology to cut the traditional operating costs of a hospitality asset, use the data to better select and better optimize assets, and take this moment in time where hotel rooms were looking kind of boring, and create a new brand that resonated with customers that could bring people to location. So you basically leverage a brand and technology play to do an end around on very well-run companies, which are Marriott and Hilton and others. So that was the bet we all made. And we did not get to see it, partially due to COVID.
So COVID hit. I can only imagine. So, like you said, in 4 years, you've gone from nilch to 800 listings. And then all of a sudden, one day, I know it kind of transpired over a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We started hearing the rumblings. Oh, something's going on in Asia. Then, oh wait, something's going on in New York was the first spot. Yeah. I remember how I feel at that time. I could only imagine how you were feeling. Take us, put us in your shoes.
So I'll probably never forget many moments in the, hey, this COVID thing is real. The timeline that eventually resulted in us moving out of all of our leases and laying off 92% of the company before trying to rebuild. But so what was really wild is in kind of at the end of January of 2020, we presented a board meeting, and a board member in that meeting said, you all need to run a downside scenario where your revenue drops 95% for the next 12 months and figure out how you're going to survive. So that board member was way ahead of the curve, Andrew Beebe.
A revolutionary.
And we kind of laughed and said, like, we don't need to run the numbers.
How would that happen?
We're dead. Like, that's just obvious, right?
Like a nuclear bomb hits? Like what?
Yeah,
what's going to make that happen?
We were in conversations with OTAs at the time about some deals that would have been actually very additive to Lyric's vision. So we were about to exit the lease model. We had another $100 million in capital. We were lining up to buy assets. We even thought till the end of February, I thought we were going to sign the largest deal in industry history. And I remember calling my dad and saying, COVID is real, but we're about to sign these deals. We'll be perfectly positioned to survive it. And we're going to buy up the whole industry on the other side. And he said, well, have you signed the deal yet? And I said, no, but we have one of the two signatures required to get the deal done. And he said, well, why don't you call me when the second one hits? And that was February, the last day of February.
And was this to buy an asset?
Oh, this was a large capital raise and a deal with an OTA that would have driven their traffic directly to Lyric. So very additive partnership.
Got it.
Unclear whether we could have survived even with that.
Sure.
But it
would have been crazy. Yeah, it would have been a revolutionary concept. Or
we would have taken a different course had the deal hit, almost for sure. That deal fell apart on March 1st. And that OTA said, hey, we'll see you on the other side of COVID. Good luck, right? What had happened before America got hit was China got hit and Italy got hit. So OTAs were seeing booking volume drop by 99%. And that's why our board member, because another OTA sat in our boardroom and was telling us some of the numbers here, that's when our board member said, run that downside scenario. So we knew we were toast. And honestly, there's kind of like in startups, if you're going to be, for lack of a better term, if you're going to be in a tough position, it's better to be in a really, really, really tough position, because the really tough position we were in, I had teammates coming up to me by kind of the end of February, early March, saying, you have to lay us off, and you know it, and we know it, and this has been an awesome run, but like it's time to pull the plug on what is Lyric and try to rebuild post-COVID. So that's what we did. Very emotional. We were a distributed office at that point because COVID had basically shut down San Francisco. So we laid off 92% of the company over Zoom. And to the other 12 people who remained, we said, we're a software company now, and we might build back an operating co after COVID passes, but we don't know.
Did you cry?
I cried once. I cried because our board member did an incredibly nice thing for the people we laid off. And the incredibly nice thing he did was he basically said, we're not laying off. So technically we could have given our teammates very little in severance. And our board gave us the guidance that we could take as good a care of them as was legally possible. And I called him later that night after we had laid off everyone. And I said, you have never met a single teammate that you just took the best care of that we legally could have. And I just want to say thank you. And as venture capitalists are sometimes they sometimes have the reputation of not caring about folks. And this person took care of our team in a way that was, to me, so indicative of the character he had that, yes, I definitely cried there. And I was like, thank you so much, because you allowed me to take care of people that I care about. So that was the moment that really got to me. But everything else before that was just like, it was so absurd. I didn't even have time to pause and think until that moment.
Wow. Kudos to him. Amazing
individual.
What's his name? Should we give some love? Or?
I would totally name this individual, but I just, well, it's a board member I'm still lucky to work with today.
Sure.
And just because, when stuff like that happens, I just actually keep it a little closer to the chest in case there's ever a ramification.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we're moving on. So effectively, you burned your ships.
I burned the ship.
You kept a couple of the ships.
Yeah.
But you burned practically all of them.
Yeah.
However, you gave the folk on the ships time and resources, life. You gave them watercraft to get back to shore and build for themselves, which was great. How did you? With the limited ships you have, how did you, what's the term, the phoenix rises from the ashes? How did you rise?
It took a little while. Because of COVID, a bunch of us just sat in our desks and at our rooms for 12 months. And what we needed to do was to grow our software business, where the revenue had dropped 80%. We needed to grow that at least back to the point where we could go to investors and say there's a viable, interesting business here. If we had not achieved that, we would have gone bankrupt, right? So we kind of held that, like, our team at that point knew, holy smokes, we are in a dead sprint to build a product offering that gets enough traction that investors will support recapitalizing this business and reforming it. That took, I think 18 months. It took us 11 months to build and launch what we now call Wheelhouse Pro. So a professional version of a revenue management platform. And we were aided in that quest or journey because, we had operated 800 doors. We had built Wheelhouse and we had built kind of tools above our pricing tool. We had built our own version of Wheelhouse internally that we're like, if we bring this to market, I think professional operators are going to like it. So we brought V1 of that to market about 11 months later, whatever it was, 12 months later, and started going out the door and bringing it to customers who had a really good response. But it was only when we got back to, we were still like a little less than 2 million in revenue when the current investor said, hey, we'll restructure this business. Let's go. So that was a number of years ago now, but we had enough traction. And when you restructure a business, you say, hey, I know, we had raised $100 million in equity. We had to go to those folks and say, your investment is no longer worth that. And you need to position this team to have a chance to build to
raise again.
Yeah. To raise again. And for our employees all have upside.
Yeah.
And we kind of settled on what looked like a
down round, effectively.
A massive down round. Yeah, where we restructured the business where we ended up looking kind of like a Series A company coming out of it. And in that case, I was able to go to all my teammates who had fought and said, hey, we all trusted our investors again, that they would handle this situation well, and they have, and here's your new business. Do you want to keep building it together? So it was about 18 months of that uncertainty, but putting trust in the teammates to be very good at development and in our board who had already taken care of all the teammates we had let go, basically betting again that should we build an interesting venture, that we would find the fair way to handle it. And we did. So that was the Phoenix Rising was a little bit of product work, revenue growth through new motions of B2B software sales, and a trust that the restructure would ultimately result in a business that it made sense for everyone, leadership team, product team included, to continue building.
So when did you have that aha moment? Like you said, I know you guys were using the tool Wheelhouse internally. I'm sure it wasn't called Wheelhouse. It wasn't branded at that point. What was the point where you're like, I think we have something for others? Yeah. I know you told me before that you felt that the large property managers or the growing property managers were underserved.
Yeah.
But when was that point where you're like, oh, we have product market fit here?
Well, I was wrong about that too. So having built beyond pricing, Wheelhouse really has two main competitors today. We have Beyond Pricing and we have Price Labs. And what was very interesting to us when COVID hit, we were like, well, we would never have bought either of those softwares. But the question is why, right? Was that just hubris or was there something behind it? What was interesting to us at the time was you had these teams making pricing recommendations who had never published any pricing research. And when you looked at their roster of talent, so their employees, none of them were employing advanced like PhD level machine learning or like any folk like statisticians who we thought was the requisite talent required to build a pricing engine. Now we had that and we had built it and we had analyzed our research for a long time. And so we kind of thought initially that all we had to do was publish our research and everyone would be like, oh my God, this is so clearly the best pricing engine out there. So our first move was to take what was really a pricing engine and launch that, make all of our data, all of our research public, and also bring two data tools around it. So competitive sets and market reports. And we thought that would kind of suffice, be a better product for any large operator, right? A fully transparent pricing engine where you could look at all the data inputs being market report and comp set. So we launched that at the start of 2021. And that product, and we called Wheelhouse Pro, which I thought was going to have crazy market fit. And we won an award almost about 6 months later. We won the Data and Revenue Management Award for like innovation in product in the industry. All that eventually taught us was a bunch of folks came up to us and said, congrats on your award. I don't want what you're selling. We actually want to buy a revenue management platform and not a pricing engine. The difference is pricing engines are kind of set it and forget it. Turn it on, tweak a few knobs and dials. Revenue management looks a lot more like, hey, what's that A/B test you're going to run to optimize your minimum stay policy? Revenue management looks like, hey, I've got 150 doors. I'm not going to fully trust a pricing engine, but I need a way to be able to quickly analyze and edit a strategy. So say I just want to take the next 30 days across 150 properties and drop them 8%. On a tool like Beyond, that action, you'd have to do 150 separate actions to make that take place. If we could just unify into one call, we could make the platform 150 times faster. So what Wheelhouse focused on when we found product market fit was not just launching a pricing engine, but launching a revenue management platform where the thing our customers bought was a very fast way to build their perfect pricing strategy. And that's when we found product market fit. So we thought we had it, we launched it, we won an award, we hadn't found it. True product market fit came, I think, God, not for another 12 months after that award, because people told us you're wrong, and we listened to them and built what they needed.
You listen to your customers.
It only took 7 years.
Rule 101 of startups.
You know, there's listening to your customers and then there's hearing your customers, because your customers won't always be able to tell you really what they want. So just continuing to poke at that, like, hey, you said X, we built Y.
They also don't always know what they want.
Right. So
because if no one's built it, then they're not sure what it looks like.
Yeah. And sometimes they don't know what technology can deliver. Right. They don't know that they can have it 150 times faster. They don't know that a page load speed of 10 seconds is not sufficient and that they should load like that. So those type of things, which sometimes matter to buyers, aren't obvious, especially in our industry where a lot of the property management companies, they're not served by great technologies historically. So being able to see a technology where all of a sudden they said, I used to take this job used to take me 40 hours a week and now I can do it in 2. You just gave someone an entire employee back. Of course they're going to pay you $20 a month per listing, right? Like that's a no-brainer. So yeah, sometimes people don't realize what technology can provide. And so an entrepreneur, you got to stitch all that, what the customer complains about, what they don't know about, what they might not say, into product market fit. It's a fun journey, right? You do the same thing.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, granted, I would say that for me, I needed to grow my portfolio. That was my goal. And for me, I needed outside capital partners on both the equity side as well as the debt side, like buying properties, as well as I needed to convince people that I should manage their properties. So I had a process that was Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations that were different for both of those. If I was sending a bank, I would send them a certain spreadsheet and create a certain PowerPoint for them. If I was sending an investor something, I would, do the same. So everything was like very manual and time intensive. And for myself, if I was analyzing a property, it took me a while. I was copying and pasting information from 15 different places. So what I did at first was like, I'm going to take this process I have that I know is the right process, but it's slow AF. And I know there's a way to make it faster and better, and I'm going to do it. And I hope there's people like me out there, frankly.
But that's the best. I mean, if you serve yourself first, right? Customer number one is a dream position for an entrepreneur. And I've seen what you built today. It's awesome. Like it makes sense. Like it is an informed by usage product that others can now use. And now you made it available everywhere, right? Like it's a fantastic innovation pattern for sure.
Yeah. And I did have the one thing that I had that was unique to me and in hindsight was like beneficial. You could say lucky was I had started shit posting on TikTok,
That's amazing.
back in 2020,
Who
2021.
Who knew? Yeah.
And people were like, how are you raising money to buy these houses? And I'd go, I've got this spreadsheet over here and I've got this PowerPoint over here. And like, people are like, well, could we buy it? And I was like, I mean, it sucks. Like I could, if you really want, I'll sell you this spreadsheet that I'm not like the proudest of it, but like, sure. And people would buy it. And it was like, oh wow, if people are going to buy this, like effectively A, it's going to give me money to like fund what I think is better, but B is some degree of validation that there are people out there who want. So like, you built something, complex and you really had to, it took it took a while. But I'd always recommend to folk, like try to sell something as simple as possible. And if you're able to sell that and you have some degree of traction there, then try to build something, APIs, yada, yada, that, technically is more difficult.
Yeah. But it's not like hotels are underwritten off anything different. Like they're still underwritten on an Excel spreadsheet and the data inputs are different. And what you recognized was like, hey, could you take a form factor and start to supply the right data around it to help people invest in really a fundamentally new asset class, right? So like fantastic opportunity for scrappy entrepreneurs to build technology and to leverage like good enough solutions to build a business. I think it's one of the reasons I love our category so much is because the distributed nature of assets, of like how someone can get in the door and how are you going to merchandise these assets and how are you going to sell them across all these new emergent channels and how are you going to underwrite the asset and figure out where to invest. Like Airbnb going mainstream enabled a whole generation of entrepreneurs to start building solutions for these new folks. So pretty excellent in retrospect.
So I agree. And this is what I say, this industry, like if I were doing commercial real estate, no matter what I did, I don't think there's any way at like 27 years old where I could host like the commercial real estate podcast and actually people listen and be like, oh, this guy has something credible to say. This is such a new industry where young folk, you got a youthful spirit, so I'm gonna call you young.
41.
That's young. I mean, for
sure.
all sakes and purposes, though, that is young, and most like real estate, probably traditional property management. That's like it's been around hundreds of years.
Yeah. Well, and technology shifted that game and look, I mean, when we built Lyric, a hospitality company, I would never say I'm a real estate expert, and I would never say I was a hospitality expert. I mean, Lyric was a premium brand.
It was a new sector.
Yeah. But the advantage we had was technology and trends. So trends were, holy smokes, this new inventory type, Airbnb, has come along, and all of a sudden, hospitality went from selling someone a bed and a television to your porch, pool, patio, Wi-Fi, pickleball court, basketball court, etc. And that pickleball court is worth more in the summer than it is when it's covered in snow, right? So like technology and trends enabled new entrepreneurial ventures to emerge. On the commercial side, it's interesting because I actually would say COVID is ultimately going to probably reinvent the commercial. I mean, it already has to some degree reinvented how a lot of commercial spaces are going to be used. in retail. So in some ways, like, again, it's kind of like, well, what's the new trend, or is there a new technology that gives younger folks an edge over the traditional, the folks who have the huge asset base and all the experience to leverage?
The suits.
The suits.
And that is where experiential hospitality, you have the edge over the suits, because a couple of reasons I would say, the folk who want to deploy $100 million in assets, it is really, really, really hard to deploy that much capital and have an edge.
Yeah.
In short-term rentals, it really comes down to being thoughtful about the experience you're creating. You could, the way you can quantify that is pickleball courts, basketball courts, swimming pools, hot tubs. Amenities are the easiest way. Right. But in reality, it's really just actually having a feel and a care for making sure people have a great time, which it's easy to, one property, it's easy to do that. 2 properties, it's pretty easy to do that. I do believe 25 or so is where I think it's still relatively easy to do that. When you get to like the 100, 200, 300, 500, it is more and more challenging to have that same degree of attention to detail that you do when you have a smaller portfolio. So I do think it's a place where like the little guys can win, like the David Goliath, like the David can come out on top. For me, 23-year-old could grow a business and quit his job in a year, which if there was another way of doing it, I would have done whatever way there was to do it. It was just, frankly, to me, the only way to do it. And I got lucky. I kind of stumbled into it. And I think you're seeing this play out right now with Vacasas. They tried to buy up all the property managers, all the boutiques. They scaled from, do you even know when they started? I don't know.
I don't know. Not the exact year, but probably 2011-ish, 2012-ish, maybe 2013.
But granted, they went from 0 to 40,000 by eating up all the Davids and paying the Davids well. Yeah. The Davids walked out. They were
very happy.
The Davids are on a beach right now. They're okay.
Yeah.
But they did that, and now they're a Goliath, and they're struggling because it's hard for them, 6 employees down the ladder, the one who's actually interfacing with the homeowner or interfacing with the property, to care.
Right. And I think is one question that's been asked about our industry is like, can folks get to scale in our industry? And with Vacasa, it's interesting because it's such a roll up. Maybe it was harder to consolidate, to gain true advantages against the locals. In Europe, you do see very large companies that are at that scale and larger who are succeeding. So I always say that someone in America is going to successfully build that 40, 50,000 door hospitality company in the short-term rental space. I think they're your age, and I think they're going to figure out how to use technology and a unified brand and potentially new assets, or potentially assets really truly built around the use case of a short-term rental. So I think the emergence of that very large door successful hospitality company is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in our space.
And I think what's important there is extenuating the benefits that you get at scale. And it seems like that's what your tool, because like, for example, I'm on a lake. When I started, there was 3 properties on that lake. We were the third one. Now there's 80 lake houses. We are 8 of them. So we own 4, we manage 4. Yep. Our pricing is so much more dialed in than everybody else. If you look at all 80 properties in the market, you stack the revenue, we're like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 10, 11. And I would say, yeah, sure. Part of it is because I'm a pro. I know how to, I know the tips and tricks and whatnot. But I would also just I have the data. I have 8 properties. So if 6 of them just got booked, all of a sudden I'm like, oop, these other 2 here, trigger, right. Something's going on here. Time to jack the rates on these ones. So there are times when scale does give you. I would preface that though with scale in a specific area.
Yeah, multi-market opens up new challenges versus if you can be really dominant in one market or very good in one market, that's kind of a predicate step for attempting a second market, in my opinion. Some folks go distributed right from the start. You're taking the approach, it sounds like, of being...
I am distributed. Each location I'm in, I do have more than one.
Yeah, which is a nice advantage.
I'm in 5. I'm in 5 markets. So I would say I'm relatively distributed. But at this point, I got a property that I saw last night that's actually close to here. And I'm like, damn, it's kind of the perfect property. It's kind of what I'm looking for. But it's at this point like really hard for me to be like, I'm going to do a new market just because I already have my vendors, I already have everything, I already have my pricing dialed in. I know you have to learn a market, in my opinion. Like you don't just jump in and like, you don't, from a revenue management standpoint, if you're just going to set it and forget it with a software, that's fine. But I actually want to like be intimate and like understand why the heck is this year going crazy? Like what's going on? Oh wait, why is it not going crazy? I'll give an example. This September on that lake, traditionally September is the best month, which people go, why? It's a lake. Why is September the best month? Because the Blue Ridge Rock Festival, as well as the national like Ferrari racing, are at the Virginia International Racetrack down the road. And it's been there every year the last 3 or 4 years. This year, neither of them are happening.
Right.
So what I did was I'm like, okay, I know the pricing software is telling me I've got to be at $1,000 a night because that's what we hit the last 3 years. I know these 2 events aren't happening. The market occupancy is going to go from like 70, 80% this month, I think, to like 30, 40. Like September is like an edge and, people go back to school. So what I did was I dropped my prices precipitously in advance and I got filled up. I'm doing half the revenue this month that I did last month, this is my first year-over-year monthly decrease I've had in like a long time.
It's really good.
So
that you haven't had that yet.
Yeah. So it hurts a little bit, but it's because I had that intimate knowledge of the market where it's still a profitable month. It's still fine. I'm curious with you because like what's your average customer? Like how many listings do they have, or what's the range you have? And like,
yeah. So our average customer, so we serve folks in 100 countries. We certainly have people with 1 or 2 listings. Our average customer has 15 listings. Our largest customer is north of 5,000. So we have really, a couple of years ago, Wheelhouse had basically no one with more than 100 properties. We had a few folks. And that was, I shared that what Wheelhouse wanted to attack after we lost Lyric was serve the needs of these large property managers, large operators. So we have gone from essentially no enterprise business to, I think, we're something like 80% of our revenue now comes from people with north of 100 properties. So it's a massive amount of our revenue stream comes from serving the needs of those folks, right? So we kind of pick people off of Beyond, and people, when they scale on Price Labs, they usually come over to Wheelhouse once they reach a certain point. And we've really focused on serving the needs of those larger folks. And our average listings per user would be much higher if we hadn't had that long tail of folks who actually were already using Wheelhouse with like 1 or 2 properties.
So the folks with 5,000 properties, 100 properties, how do they remain successful at scale? Are those folk growing, shrinking? Are they like, what are they doing?
The large majority, we like working with the large folks because they are still acquisitive right now. So they're acquiring people with 100 plus properties. So at 5,000, they're looking at various markets they can go into and purchase the David, right?
And by scale. Yeah.
By scale often, yeah. And also they're really good at, they'll have acquisition functions that are very effective. So, they'll target 100 properties in a market with a flyer or an outreach or whatever it may be. So the large folks have enough scale where they start to have, the way I think about it is revenue management is an extremely boring term for what should be your growth function. Pricing is set it and forget it. Revenue management is like, okay, how do you communicate with owners to make sure they stay with you forever? How do you communicate with the owner who's not with you now and say, hey, if you moved over to my property management business, we can increase your revenue by 8, 20, 30%. So advanced teams will have someone who is looking at owner acquisition, owner retention, et cetera, to very much outperform folks on the retention and acquisition game. So they're scaling their portfolios.
Got it. So folk with 5,000, folk with 100, what are you seeing with them? Are people getting to 100, or like, I'm curious, like what's going, like, I feel like you just have a very good grasp of what's going on.
So our listing retention as a platform for enterprise is about 120%. And so what that means is people stay and grow with us. That's an annualized listing retention. And that's inclusive of like a few folks will leave the platform. So like what that's really saying is the customers who stay with us are growing quite a bit. like more than that 120%.
Seems like the customers who are using you are also the more on it customers.
Yeah, they're I mean, when we think about serving the needs of our customers, is not, are we going to help you price a day perfectly? It's, are we going to help you scale your portfolio and eventually exit your business should you want to?
I thought it was really cool when Andrew gave me the demo. I'd never seen anything like it, but you showed me like a topographical 3D view of, I think we looked at like Breckenridge, Colorado, or some mountain market, where you were like, yeah, you can actually, you know, if you're in Breckenridge and you're managing 10, 20 properties, do you want your listings to be pulling data from a property on the other side of the mountain that doesn't have access to the ski lifts? Right. No, you want the 50, you want to be able to pick the ones that are within walking distance of the ski set. Like that is the comp set that you should be comparing yourself to.
That you should be listening. Exactly.
And even that, the view of it, I was like, it was literally, I saw the mountains and like it was so cool. I felt like I was flying like a bird.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. The true secret to, I don't want to put it that way. A very important aspect of hospitality is combining geographic insights and performance data, right? So you're right. Like, if you were looking at Breckenridge for the first time and you saw two dots that were very close, you might make an assumption that they're very similar. They should have similar performance. But if in between those two dots, there's one's on the shaded side of away from the mountain, that is going to have a significant impact on what you're selling to customers at the end of the day. And Zillow and other real estate sites have created that ability to discern value really well in a way that the short-term rental space has not. But we will. And it'll be teams like you and teams like Wheelhouse that probably combine a little bit to deliver that.
Let's go. Let's get it. We're helping folk grow. And I think that's the important thing, is helping people grow their portfolios.
Yeah.
That's what you want to be. You know, that's like, I guess if you think about your mission as a company, to me, that's like BNBCalc. It's like, what is BNBCalc? I mean, frankly, it is a tool for specific use cases, but really it's that mission of folk like myself who wanted to grow. And still want to grow. Granted, BNBCalc, the more of y'all who use it, I don't know, the less time I can...
You build software, yeah. And help everyone build, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, you kind of nailed it earlier too. Like, okay, so when you look at sitting with a property manager or a large operator, you would think about serving the entire financial needs of their business eventually, right? So pricing a night is one thing. Helping retain an owner is another thing. Thinking through merchandising strategies, that's all part of like using data to inform a better revenue strategy as opposed to just automated pricing. And when you mentioned earlier that you had to go to banks and talk to folks about raising capital, it's like, well, do you think a bank is better positioned to understand whether you are a good operator of your business, or would a team like BNBCalc or Wheelhouse? I would argue in time, like, we'll have a far better signal about whether, someone should be in a position to scale their portfolio than, Wells Fargo figuring out, should I write you a loan for $5 million so you can go expand?
That's interesting. So financing is something you think is potentially on the horizon.
I don't think we'll build it. I think we'll
partner.
It.
Yeah, you'll partner with the bank, and you guys will effectively help underwrite the deal.
Yeah, right.
Or provide risk profiles.
When you go to the core thesis of Wheelhouse, we think a fundamentally new asset class has and will continue to emerge, and that no traditional, you can't take a hotel model and slap it onto the space, or a long-term rental model and slap it on the space. So with a new asset class should come a new entire financial stack, and we think there are a multitude of outcomes that can be derived from by building that. And our way of getting there is like, well, it's hard to underwrite if you can't price a night well. So we try to like be very, very, very good at that one specific thing, expecting it to ladder up to all other financial decisions that a company makes.
But plugging in and being exposed on that per night basis, you have a very good visibility overarching on what's happening. And question for you, what is happening? 2024, you said you've been through all the waves, 2019, 2020, good days, whatever, bad days for cities, good days for rural vacation, push back to cities, lesser demand, higher supply in rural vacation markets. Yeah. What's going on today? And then what can we expect from Wheelhouse moving forward?
Sweet. So I'll predicate this by, I'm not an economist. And my business is not actually coming up with macro definitions. Like key data is really good at that. And I rarely am super comfortable talking about macro, but I'll explain why. Publicly, right now, Vacasa is in a very difficult position, hemorrhaging units. Okay, well, there's a lot of private operators with 1,000, 5,000 units who are snatching up those portfolios now and are putting together large capital raises to go acquire that inventory, right? So the public perception of Vacasa falling apart is actually a massive opportunity for certain folks.
Trust me, that's literally what the folk I work with in our mastermind. I'm not just going to say only Vacasa, but big property managers who are underserving their clients are the ripest fruit to pluck from the tree.
Right. And then you'll go to markets like, so historically, I'll put on my economist hat for a second, 21, 22, and 22 in particular were absolutely banner years. And most markets have seen some fall off from those highs. Although the fall off is a little bit determined by like, well, what, luxury and large properties generally are still selling well, right? So when you want to understand like, how's your portfolio doing, you have to be in our category. The challenge is you have to get so damn granular and specific to understand performance, right? So when you were saying like that Wheelhouse has a new tool, we call it Navigator, that helps you like draw a boundary around like just properties that are near a ski resort. Well, certain ski resorts did really well last year, and certain ones that didn't get snow, guess what? They didn't do well. So there's like, I actually think macro trends.
So I'm scared of the Poconos a little bit.
Yeah. So
like 20 years from now, there's still gonna be snow on those hills? I don't know.
Right. I know. Right. Like, and like, but then it's like, okay, well, maybe snowmaking equipment will get better, and who knows, like, what's going to happen, right? So, I always think I don't read enough about trends everywhere to know generally what's happening. I know our customer base is expanding at a good clip, about as fast as they ever have. So I think that's obviously a signal that I'll take. But I think the risk of sharing a macro strategy is it causes someone to make a bad business decision, when I think in our space, every decision is local. It's all local, right? So I'll say generally markets are booking a little bit slower. Lead times have decreased for sure. In your case, listeners, is probably going to be really different. So like, to understand what business decision you should make from anything that I share, go look at actual data for your market. Too bland of an answer?
No, that's right. And I think that, there's so much freaking nuance in this game. Like if we're sitting in New York City went from 17,000, 18,000 listings down to like 4,000 or 5,000. All right. Is the end of the world coming? No. Operators in Newark, New Jersey, Jersey City are absolutely caking right now.
Right.
Also hotels are caking, but that's a story for another day.
There's all that nuance, and you kind of named how like events do shift around, and that changes like the an impact on a month. But there are larger trends of like where are people traveling to that are always fluctuating.
Yeah.
And the best, like, our space is so exceptional because most people know their local business really well, their local community really well, and when you think about it, it's all entrepreneurs. All the portfolios are run by entrepreneurs, not by suits, which meant when COVID hit, people had health policies out the door in a week saying, hey, here's how we're cleaning our homes now with COVID. Come and stay with us. Here's how our pet policy changed during COVID because, it makes sense to leave your pet at the vet for 2 days, but not for 14. So when longer stay patterns emerged, our space adapted with very fast pet policies, right? So like this all to say that our space is so reactive. Our entrepreneurs are so reactive. The data is so specific. Like for me to tell you what you should invest in next, I need to see how travel trends have changed. Are more groups coming to your market? Are more corporate travelers coming to your market? If so, what are they buying? Like electric charging is looking like a good investment from an amenity perspective. And 5 years ago, that wasn't the case, right? So there's just all this fluidity and nuance that makes me, even if I spend all my day reading about broad trends, I don't know that I would communicate it without a massive number of caveats. So that's what I do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing that versus just being a hype beast. I think people are greatest time ever. And I think it's also a cool space because you can have like very specific, tangible bets. For example, when I started, 2020, 21, and I have 4 properties that we bought are on a specific lake. And the rationale for that was a couple things. One, from an appreciation standpoint, they're not building new lakes. So I think things are only going to go up in value. Supply and, scarcity. I call it natural scarcity. This is something you can't rebuild. From an actual rental revenue standpoint, I do think we have like a crazy COVID boom right now, and it's going to wane off to an extent for these rural areas. But they're building a Caesar's Palace down the road. And it just makes sense to me that if you're going to go to, so in Virginia, they allowed 6 casinos to be built. And we're in North Carolina, but the lake's on the northern tip. And then right across the border is Danville, Virginia, which is a town that, was struggling economically. So they allowed them to have a casino. Caesars came in, $1 billion casino. And I'm just like, okay, you're going to tell me that you wouldn't want to just go to the lake for a weekend,
right?
And then rip the casino, rip a Caesars at night,
or win and come, win and then stay longer, right?
Yeah, lose all your money, and then need to go be on the water in order to save yourself mentally. So that was a bet, but it was like a tangible bet based off specific things. So if you look at the entire macro, and your strategy is dependent on the world, you're not doing yourself service. You need to really think about, all right, how am I going to position myself within this new, growing, emerging field? What do I have conviction on? For me, it was, all right, large houses. I don't want to compete with hotels. Frankly, the properties in our portfolio that have competed with hotels are the ones that have had the most issues. I ended 3 lease. I only had 3 apartments. Actually, I guess I have 4 apartments, but one of them is on top of a 4-bedroom unit. So together it equals a 6-bedroom house. I had 3 apartments and we ended our lease. I do some rental arbitrage, co-hosting, and then also buy. So even within that game, there's 4. I also do glamping. So there's even within short-term rentals, there's nuance on like the different strategies that you can do. Right now is a great time for co-hosting because these Davids are not providing the service they need to provide. So there's tons of opportunity. However, for arbitrage, it's getting the small apartment arbitrage games getting tougher because there's so much new supply of multifamily inventory in the United States. There were so many buildings, 4-story. If I'm in the South, I can literally drive around and I see all these boring looking 4-story buildings.
Mostly Nashville.
Yeah, exactly. In North Carolina, you see them everywhere too. Mm-hmm. And, those 3 apartments I had, 16 apartments down the road got completed, renovated, and someone is arbitraging every single one of those units. Yeah. So there's new supply of multifamily, but there's not as much new supply of single family. There's so much freaking nuance here. We could go all day.
Yeah. But what I think is interesting. So you mentioned like, okay, what macro can you bet on, or what macro maybe is interesting. So let's think about how unoptimized our space is right now. For example, we're in New York right now, and tomorrow, one of TikTok's representatives is coming to speak about how TikTok is very interested in vacation rentals and people listing their vacation rentals on TikTok. And you have a very new, interesting distribution channel, which is you have 100,000 plus Instagram followers, right? And there's these new distribution channels that are emerging. When you think about merchandising in our space, well, for one of your places that has a pickleball court, like for a family, you might want to show the pickleball court, but for, if you knew the person looking at your property was a business traveler, you'd probably want to show them the desk that they can work out looking out over a beautiful spot. So merchandising is super nuanced, or super early in our space, basically underdeveloped, completely undeveloped, even though a new asset class has emerged. When you look at other technology trends that are bigger, I think distributed inventory is going to be in. And partly, I'll go to the absurd right now, but I live in San Francisco, and about 10% of the cars on the road right now are self-driving cars. And that technology is not 10 years away anymore. It's 5. Oh, and there's about 50% electric. So all of those trends, when self-driving cars are available, do we think people are going to travel more or less? More is the answer, right? So does that mean that distributed inventory is more likely to be in? I would say yes, because all of a sudden you can safely drive a family member out to a particular location, or you can drive and work. All of these trends. Your
productivity increases because instead of driving, you're spending your time doing it.
Work on the road and work from anywhere. And Starlink's incredible, right? Starlink is making rural America incredibly accessible from a work perspective. So all these technologies are playing into, I would argue, the start of distributed hospitality being the dominant accommodations offering. So for folks, that's the macro trend I can trust, which is just technology. What is the curve of technology look like? What's inevitable about adoption? I think electric cars are inevitable at this point. I think self-driving cars are inevitable. And can you think about opportunities that emerge from those trends where maybe you can have a large amenity-rich offering that all of a sudden it doesn't take someone an hour to get to. It takes them one work meeting when they're working anyway. And that's the stuff that's like, oh, we're still in the early innings of how this asset class emerges.
Yeah, I liked your point earlier about TikTok, because so Kyle, who his episode should have dropped before this one, maybe 1 or 2 weeks before. Kyle does massive barndominiums in the Midwest. A large part of his distribution is through social media. And I've been trying to help him on a revenue management strategy. And we're just like, it's so hard to price this thing because it's such a unique offering. And if the traffic is coming from social media, it makes sense to double down on the social media and then use that. Oh, if we have a viral post and all of a sudden 20-30% of our calendar fills up, okay, we need to increase pricing. Like, that's the triggers. So that trigger isn't even an Airbnb down the road got booked, we need to increase our pricing. It's, oh, we had a viral, TikTok. Right. So I think we can both agree that there's just so much exciting new stuff, which creates a lot of opportunity, but you have to be willing to roll with the punches.
Explore them, find what works for you, and roll with them. 100%.
Beautiful. So if folk are trying to see how you roll with the punches and are exploring, how can they stay up to date with your journey?
Well, Wheelhouse, we're on all social, but sadly, I post the most on LinkedIn and then Twitter next. For the journey, I mean, first of all, if we can be helpful to anyone, like, I always love talking to entrepreneurs or people scaling portfolios. I'm available at andrew@usewheelhouse.com, or message me on any platform where I'm out there. Our company, Wheelhouse, we serve folks with one listing and 5,000, and are happy to help if we can help you scale your portfolio to achieve your goals. That's where we'll be available. And otherwise, we go to a lot of conferences, we hang out with a lot of folks, and always happy to say hello.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for physically coming here today, Andrew.
Super fun.
And everybody, stay tuned to the next episode of the Short Term Rental Pros podcast.